This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision. It's been a while since I've had a segment here, but I'm back in town from my various labors in the field, and thought I'd catch up. Let me adjust the camera here just a touch. It's early on Sunday morning, and I'm easy. And I wanted to talk about Juneteenth, because it's one of those strange subjects that's kind of come around but not full force, and I think I don't understand what a lot of people were trying to get at as we talked about Juneteenth in various fora, and including Michelle Martin's Tell Me More on NPR. And I just got an invitation from a guy named D. Burt, aka Afro Nerd, who's got nice podcast set up at Afro Nerd Radio, so you ought to check it out. It's a Yahoo someplace, but if you just look up Afro Nerd, you're sure to find him. And D-Burt, like me, is on the right hand of the political spectrum, as is his guest for this particular topic. And he was pretty upset about the violent incidents that are associated with Juneteenth this year, as the coverage has gone on, and he read into some detail about some people dragged from a car, and some in Austin, Texas, and some other teens attacking a car in Minnesota someplace, and some other incident that happened in New York's upstate. And he couched his discussion in terms of do uppity black folks have the right, do white folks have the right to criticize lower class black folks? And so that gives you an idea where that discussion is, and from a perspective of conservative, the way he couches it, it's an absolute yes. But it's an absolute yes anyway, as far as I'm concerned. Everybody has the right to be criticized. That's what you get when you live in a democratic society where class is more transient. If class wasn't so transient, then we wouldn't worry about it so much, because there would be nothing out there, no low-hanging fruit, no brass ring to grab at, and so criticism of people in a different class would just be superfluous. But here in America, we feel like everybody is mobile, everybody has a chance. And that is one of the things I think sustains the kind of criticism that we hear between the classes, because it's like I was listening to De La Soul Grind Date the other day. It's black men, get on your job. We expect you to progress. We expect you to climb. We expect you to do better. And that is a typical American expectation. And so because of that expectation of class mobility, the criticism is a little bit more tough. And there's always going to be somebody who's going to have advice. This is what you need to do, and black people ought to do this, and black people ought to do that. And ultimately, so that we could all be some kind of brothers. But as I've noted before, criticism within the middle classes is the most catty of them all. And most African Americans, of course, are middle class. And I would define the middle class broadly. But yeah, let me get into that, because one of the important things that I come from my perspective in the old school is class criticism, and I think class criticism is ascendant, and it should be, and racial solidarity is on the downswing, and it should be, and I hope in some ways that's a permanent downswing. But I talk about class in two ways. I talk about broadly an American class, and then I talk about a narrowly African American class. So let me start with the narrow of African American class, and I essentially give it a quintile because of Andrew Hacker's Money, the book that I read. It's probably a decade old now, and it was very useful. A useful book to think about how Americans think about money and class, and what the actual facts are. And he split up the American demographic into 5 economic sections. A lot of people are fond of saying SES, And whenever I hear that, I know there's a sociologist talking or somebody who used, SAS software in graduate school. But anyway, socioeconomic status, SES. And SAS is a software company out of Cary, North Carolina that does statistical accounting and all that fun stuff. The narrow quintile of black class is very simple, and I organized it to think about geography as destiny in terms of Massey and Denton, who wrote American Apartheid. And I said the one thing that determines most African American class is where they live, because, well, let's just not go into that. At the top of the pile would be the hill, living on the hill, and it's a figure of speech that we're kind of used to. Sugar Hill in Harlem was the most uppity part of Harlem in the rip-roaring days when Harlem was all that. And then there's Burb. So if you live in the Burb, if you live in the predominantly white suburban district, or as Richard Pryor said, this ain't a neighborhood, this is a residential district. If you live in the residential district in a bedroom community, you're in the Burb, which is number 2 on the quintiles for black class. And number 3, where most of us are from, is the hood. And the hood, I would describe the hood as a predominantly black urban area that is well functioning. And the hood is where all of our good stories come from. When we talk about the neighbor's daddy who could whoop you and if you got out of line. Then there's the ghetto. And the ghetto is always close to us, never far from us physically or emotionally. And that is folks who are having a hard time struggling, boys born in hard times in Mississippi, surrounded by 4 walls that ain't so pretty. We all know that story, and that's the ghetto. And then at the bottom is the projects, and sometimes I also add the sticks, because there's folks who are dirt poor, living out in the dirt as well. So from the sticks and the projects, indigent folks who are on welfare and having a very hard time making ends meet, if they meet at all, up to the ghetto and the ghetto dysfunctions and the ghetto life that Rick James used to sing about, and then the hood. And the hood, I would say, would be like old Crooklyn. You remember Spike Lee's movie Crooklyn, or why Everybody Hates Chris is on right now. That's kind of a hood movie, because people have a semblance of a normal life, although they have to deal with some harshness. And then there's the burbs, of course, and that's where, I would say that's kind of Cosby Show, although you could make the case that Cosby Show is Hill. And then there's the Hill, of course. So those are the broad sections of African American class, and of course the most friction goes on between the hood and the ghetto, and that's kind of the argument that we're hearing today around Juneteenth. And I would say that most braggadocio rap is between the ghetto and the projects, and that's what we're talking about, crab rappers and sucker MCs in that well-trod genre. Now, broadly speaking, American class, I like to look at the New York Times, I believe, did a study about 2 years ago, 2005, and it was Class in America, and I really liked that one. It was done well, and it talked about prestige of careers, it talked about income, it talked about wealth, it talked about education, and there was something else in there. I think there were 4 components, and each of those fit into 5 groups. So it broke out the dimensionality a little bit better. And I think it's important to note that there are multiple dimensions, multiple factors that don't just add up to class, but give class some subtlety and variety and flavor. I don't want to get too much into that, other than to point out that, generally speaking, African Americans are progressing. That is to say, we're not going backwards, we're going forwards. And people make a lot of big deals about conflicts between blacks and Mexicans, quite frankly. Latinos is a politically correct way of saying that, at least here in California and Texas, where we're dealing with a lot of Mexicans. And it's funny because when I moved to New York in 1991, I went to have some Mexican food because I saw a bodega and I thought, well, this is Spanish, so it must be Mexican. And there ain't many Mexicans in New York City. That's Puerto Ricans and Dominicans. And so it's a completely different thing on the East Coast than it is out here in the West and the Southwest. But I digress. I want to talk about Juneteenth. And why is it that this is a hot subject? There was I'm famously kind of have my lynch factor where I say I shouldn't raise my eyebrows unless there's 3,000 people dead. And I know that sounds a little callous, but that's part of my desire to know what's going on in the world, because I think a lot of the struggles in the African American future are on the world stage and not what happened in Gary, Indiana last week. I think we need to make some distinctions between the implications of the petty class warfare and the real things that are the legacy of black nationalism, which is moving the entire race forward. And I speak as what I call a previously proud member of the group formerly known as the Talented 10th, over which we had some responsibility, or we took it upon ourselves to take responsibility and credit and blame for the actions of middle-class blacks by being the pointing edge of the spear, and that is going to be a part of me, I think, until I'm dead, and it's one of the things that makes black politics interesting and fascinating for me. So I arrogate it upon myself, as do other black pundits and commentators, to talk about our prospects in America and in the world. And speaking for myself, I'm most definitely in the upper middle class, definitely burb and upper edge of the burb, because where I live is fairly overpriced. And certainly not only within African American class, but within American class as well. I'm in the top 5%, if not 3%, of salary owners, and I live in a neighborhood with an average home value of somewhere around $800,000. And I'm according to New York Times, I have the third most prestigious kinds of job, which is a database administrator, which is kind of interesting and funny, behind attorneys and surgeons, or physicians, doctors. So I think it's important for what it's worth, on the leading edge of the spear in my Talented 10th role, to pontificate about the prospects for the African American future as one who is in the rarefied air. I say that relatively and semi-seriously, because there is no place I have gone and no area where I have been where I have not been able to identify blacks before me. I'm not a first black anything. That era is over. There's only a few more things to be a first black in. That includes, well, you name it, there's blacks there already. And interestingly enough, I take a lot of my motivation from a book that I picked up while I was an undergrad, and said, this very thick book, Who's Who Among African Americans. And you got I don't know, 100,000 names in there. Doctors, lawyers, Indian chiefs, engineers, pioneers of all sorts and all stripes. And I said, well, I don't think I'll ever be done with pride in blackness so long as these folks are out there ahead of me. And that's going to be my crowd. And those are going to be the black folks that I want to associate myself with. And we all have that feeling. That's what goes through our juices on Black History Month, and probably should go through our juices on Juneteenth, thinking about the black folks we aspire to be. And that's what was wonderful about the Black Nationalist movement in the wake of the Civil Rights Movement, the Black Pride Movement. It was something about getting our blood up and getting our intellect up and giving us something to discipline ourselves from, to beyond mere survival. And that's what inspires us. By Malcolm X inspires us, and Marcus Garvey inspires us, and W.B. Du Bois inspires us, Booker T. Washington inspires us. All these great black men and women inspire us to go beyond what's given to us and go beyond simple expectations of us. And hopefully we internalize that and start expecting more things of ourselves. And that's where I am. That's where my mentality is. I've got the sound of the drum. I've got that message. I got it. There was no way I could grow up in my family and not have that lesson burned into my head, slapped into my head, and ingrained into my head. And so I am committed to dreams, and I am committed to progress. And the interesting thing is, one has to recognize the extent to which handling your own business is progress for the race of people. And we don't like to be role models, and I always call role models role monkeys. And we don't like to believe that, it's all about us. Rather, it's all about our values. And these are values that we hope will be transcendent and will communicate generation over generation. It's not my success that I'm talking about. It's the fact that I've learned this lesson about excellence rather than just achievement, rather than just filling the shoes that are set in front of you, rather to say, I can go beyond that. And we have a history of going beyond. I like to quote that in 1946, right after the war, I think that's a proper date, but it is in the mid 40s. Only about half of African Americans. Now, I'm lost the statistic, but it was something like half of African Americans had graduated from high school, if it was that much. The thing that's confusing me is that I found a second statistic around the same time that only about 5% of African Americans attended college at all. Not even graduated. And now we don't think about a high school degree as a particular black achievement. We're not talking about being proud of that. So in 50 years, certainly we've moved forward. So Juneteenth, my theme for Juneteenth is about the struggle. It is about the sound of the drum. It is about the ability for generations to pass this message on. And we have to do that, understanding and knowing that all of us are not going to hear the message. I can stand up here and pontificate and talk about glorious black achievement and being a part of that legacy of progress in America as we all move forward. But there are still people who don't hear the sound of the drum. There are still people in the sticks, in the hood, in the ghetto that don't hear the message, or don't listen to the message, or don't heed the message, or even mock the message, or don't think the message is for them. So they don't pick up the signal, and they don't know what freedom awaits, or they don't believe that it can happen to them. As well, there are people in the burbs, in the hood, on the hill, who think the message doesn't apply to them. Who thinks that once they have achieved a certain level of success, that they are no longer responsible to some principles and core values that have moved all people, and our people especially, forward in this country, that they become immune that they've got dollars and bling, and therefore they exist. And we have to remind ourselves of these core values, that freedom and liberty is not free, that it must be struggled for, and it must be maintained with some vigilance, and that if you slip up, you could lose it. Now, we had to do a lot of slipping in America to lose it. However, we've all had the experience where we're driving around in a nice neighborhood and you make a wrong turn and suddenly you're in a bad neighborhood. And the bad neighborhood is because people are thinking about a different level of survival. And that means in their head, in their minds, what goes and what's okay is different from the norm. It's different. People are not in the same America as we are. They're not living by the same rules, and there are not the same expectations. So I'm sure that there are places where people feel justified in breaking into somebody's car and snatching them out and beating them to the ground because they don't believe that perhaps the police are there to defend or protect them, or they don't believe that the rule of law is what ought to be ruling things. So we're always forced to deal with people that don't accept the rules of society, that they don't accept the commons, they don't accept our shared destiny. They don't feel like they have to have the same values as everybody else. They don't feel like they have to be judged the same way as everybody else. And that's the beginning of corruption of all sorts. Corruption of the soul, corruption of the mind, corruption of the body, corruption of the spirit. And we have to guard against that. And here in the old school, we try to guard against that for everyone, because we've found some enlightenment. We've found hitched ourselves to some traditional values that work, because human beings are what they are, and certain things about us just don't change. So I would encourage everyone on this Juneteenth to think about the fact that freedom is not evenly distributed, and people aren't always defending it, and people aren't always ready to commit themselves to the things that we know work and keep us in civilization. Civilization is where you put it. Civilization must be disciplined and maintained, and it has to be inside your head, because if you don't have that, and if you don't have the discipline to keep that up, then things fall apart. And we know things can fall apart rather quickly. I want to close by saying that we're all in this boat together, and it's not about me. It's not about individuals' achievements. It's not about class. It's about the values that sustain the openness of our society. Again, as I opened up this piece, I talked about the reason that we are critical between our classes. It's because in America we expect mobility. We don't necessarily, and I know I can be very uppity and I can be very dismissive, and I tend to be, because I expect people to be thinking up at this level, not at this level. You know, what's the old saying? There goes your people. And I say, I didn't raise them, because there's a certain amount of responsibility that one cannot take for people who mock your values, who decide, I'm a human being, I can do what I want, or as I said, I'm a grown-ass man, you don't tell me nothing. So there are people who feel that way, who are not aligned with values that support liberty and freedom. And sometimes you got to call them an enemy, not because they don't like you, not because there's this class friction, but because they are an enemy of liberty and freedom. And that's a dangerous thing. We can't let that go. We can't let that go at all. And so, like I said, we have this friction, we have this willingness to criticize, and that is an important part of our ability to move forward as a people. If we don't criticize ourselves, if we don't accept criticism from other people, then that is standing right in the shoes of the stereotype. That is saying, you know, it is what it is, you are what you are, some things are never going to change, and you people are going to have the same problems 200 years from now. And that cannot be, because we are all dedicated to progress within America and lifting ourselves up and changing ourselves and getting the dirt off our shoulders and moving ahead. This is Michael David Cobb Bowen for Cobb Vision. Peace and chicken grease.